So Nick, so just this weekend I was watching a video because, I like to watch Hormozy videos because to your point, I need to work on my presentation because sometimes I tend to over talk, to people and start using all kinds of terminology that gets them completely lost. And Hormozy has this really elegant way of like being able to make really difficult stuff easy to understand. And one of the videos that he put out, I was really surprised because the title was She Makes $1 Million a Year with Less Than 6,000 Followers. And it kind of like made me think, I was like, well, that's me, but with 4,000 less, And so it kind of got me thinking that I think there is this misconception that people think that having this huge, follower count equates to making a lot of money. And, we had a record breaking month in May, thanks to a couple of the changes, that we made after you and I got together in the fall and just kind of talked our way through, what kind of changes can we do to maximize what you're already doing, but actually, putting in less time. And so I thought that it would be really cool if you and I could, get together and just kind of talk about these changes because I can talk about tactical changes and strategy changes, but you do such a really great job of laying out the principles behind why the stuff that I do actually works. And so I thought that, just kind of going through the three changes that we actually made would actually help some of the people who are watching this video right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think I love, I love a good over the shoulder. There's just to preface with this, there's classroom knowledge, and then there's like street smarts. And I think it's really important that people they don't always want to see how the sausage is made, but if you are an entrepreneur, if you're building a business, you're taking live fire all the time. Like everything is urgent all the time. And so it's really helpful in my opinion, to see how people like you and me and other people around us are actually dealing with, how do you make changes? How do you learn stuff? Um, et cetera, while taking live fire, while you got bills to pay, while you have clients to enroll, while you have services to fulfill on. So yeah, I think it'd be super valuable. And I'm super excited that you had a record month.
That's awesome. I know. I know it's like every time it happens, I get really excited as like the first one happens. But so one of the things that we talked about was so I have a $7 a month program and I have $1,000 a month program. Well, it was $1,000 a month, right? And that's one of the changes that we're going to talk about. But the first thing that we had to figure out was how are we going to be able to increase the cash flow without me having to step in and do another program because that was that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do another program. I didn't want to do another quote product per se, like another like little low ticket thing. I wanted something that I was going to be able to show up and actually do, but it was like kind of like one of those one and done things. And so we talked about what were some of the things that we needed to happen in order to make the perfect lean on Laurel student. Because I know, Nick, a lot of times, I tell you that I could do better at moving people from the $7 program into that lean on Laurel program because sometimes it's my fault that, some people get in and maybe they're not quite ready. And so we were trying to figure out what is that in between thing, right? We didn't want it to be another, even though people know me for reoccurring programs, I didn't want it to be like a reoccurring thing where I was obligated to show up and do it. Nick made a suggestion that, you should do something that's a one and done workshop, like that's going to kind of bridge the gap. And, one of the things that Nick has taught me is once you have an idea, you never just go all in, you micro step into doing it. And so I had this idea that whatever I was going to do, I was actually going to do it in a micro step sort of way. And so I just kind of want to tell you guys, and this is like really behind like over the shoulder, behind the scenes. I will tell you guys when I posted this, um, I did not know what I was going to offer. I'll be completely honest. I had no idea what I was going to offer at this time, but I knew I wanted to do something for Black Friday. And I will totally give credit where credit is due. My friend Jason Fox did a two-step where he was teaching this first dibs kind of thing. And so I was like, Jason, I'm going to try this. And he does it a slightly different way. He does it with his email list. And I was like, you know what? I've got this huge organic following. Nic and I are talking about what is this in-between offer. Nic always tells me to micro step. And so the very first micro step that I did, remember, I didn't create the product. I micro stepped into, okay, how can I get my people to actually raise their hand for a Black Friday offer? And then I'll figure out what it is after. And so on November 2nd, I posted this, get on my first dibs list. People on this list will get an extra 50% off of my Black Friday offer. And you guys can see here 576 comments. And so once I actually had the social proof, okay, people want me to do something this year, right? That was the first micro step. People want me to do something this year. And one of the best ways to test a new offer is whenever people are in this kind of mode, right? I wanted to prove the concept first. And so as I was putting this out, for those of you guys who don't know, this is exactly the same way I tested my $7 program back in November of 2018. I did it as a Black Friday offer. It was a test to see if this thing was going to work out. Here, I actually took one step back. I'm like, do people even want something from me? Right? And so I just said, get on my first dibs list. People on this list will get an extra 50% off my Black Friday offer. And so once we had the validation, yes, people want something from me. I then went on to, talk to Nic, and Nic told me, hey, things are, it would be really cool if you did some type of workshop that was going to kind of bridge the gap. And Nic, do you want to talk a little bit about why you thought a workshop was going to be the perfect
Yeah.
product for me versus, selling something low ticket or selling something else that's more of a membership or anything like that? Because I think that's what most people were expecting me to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of contacts. We've spent many, many years working on stuff together. So two reasons for a workshop come to mind. One is when you are building a business and you are, I don't know, let's say under 50 years old. Generally speaking, your biggest liability is obligation. And so if you were to do something, just as an example, like a membership month to month, you would be okay because it's month to month. However, the math on memberships typically is not super profitable right up front. The money's kind of on the back end in retention. So in order to make a membership profitable, you do take on a pretty significant obligation, which we want to avoid. If you were to sell it for a year up front, you have at least a year obligation, meaning 6 months from now, you don't want to do it anymore, or something better comes along, or something tragic happens, or whatever. You are now faced with delivering on the obligation, even though it does not align with your current principles, or a big old refund, which is always painful. So the first one is, okay, how do we do this with as little obligation as possible? Uh, it's not saying no obligation, it's saying as little obligation as possible to achieve what we want to achieve. The second one is, and you mentioned, you touched on it, we've had many conversations about what makes lean on laurel students successful, because ultimately that's kind of where we want as many really good lean on laurel students as possible. And it does trickle down at the $7 program. What makes the $7 program people successful? And the answer is some version of they actually implement stuff. Right. So if we say, all right, we want specifically to identify the people and serve the people that want to implement. And there's some handful of people that don't want to implement. They just want to pay money and watch videos all day long, and that's okay. But that's not the people that we were going for. So one, how do we keep obligation to a minimum? 1 day, 1 hour, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, whatever, but not month over month over month over month. And two, how do we focus it on implementation?
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
the
your
last
work,
thing my students needed was more content to watch or another something. We needed to figure out a way to get them into implementation mode and not more things to watch.
yeah. And as a a business owner, it's your offer. What it tells you is you could put out an offer that says, hey, do you want all of my secret videos? Here's a gazillion hours and you can charge for it. People will pay for it. But all we know about them is that they want to watch more video. It's not saying they don't implement. It's just we don't know that. Whereas if you put out an implementation workshop, then we know that they value implementation. How do we know that? Because they paid money in exchange for implementation. So on many levels, it's how do we help people the best, but also how do we best identify the people uh, that are the best fit for whatever's next. So um, a workshop is the obvious answer. You do them virtual, and part of the reason you do stuff virtual is one, it's easy, and two, uh, you have such a strong desire to help everybody. Yeah. And so if we said, hey, in person, it'd be smaller, you could charge more, but it would be smaller and it would help less people and less people would have access. They'd be limited by time zones and travel and all that. So where you land on, if you run through all these principles, is a virtual workshop, implementation workshop to be more specific, with a start and an end and a outcome that they can walk away with and feel good about.
Yep. And I'll actually show people the what it actually looks like, because it's basically over 5 days. I was like, how do I, as Nick says, how do we like activate them, right? Get them to do something. And so I figured out, like, as part of my ecosystem, which is, what I teach in both Lean on Laurel and the $7 program, it made sense. It's like, okay, if I can get them to launch these 5 ads and get data, that's proof that, one, they can do the work, and two, we have data to actually help them move forward. And so what ended up happening was we got a lot of really great success stories off of this first blitz, and every single blitz that we do, which is a 3-day workshop, what Nick was just talking about, we decided to do a 3-day workshop where we would put together the 5 ads that that they actually need to have running. And so I was able to show up every single day, and I didn't teach them anything new. Like, they already had, a lot of people ask me, well, what's different than, in this than the $7 content? And my answer is nothing at all. Like, so the way that I set it up was, let's just pull out all of those 5 ads that I need people to do as fast as possible and get them done in 3 days. And so that they get because I think that most people have anxiety when they push the button on that first ad. And if I can get them to push the button on that first ad, the second one becomes easier, the third one becomes easier, and so forth. And so actually getting them to do this action over those 3 days, they actually walked away with 5 ads being done. And then after that, they got a taste of, like, oh my gosh, this is data, this isn't working. And so the next natural progression was, how do I get into Lean on Laurel? And so, this was, to me, in my opinion, Nick, I don't think we could have picked a better solution that both got people in the $7 program activated, whether they move forward or not. There was still a huge win in that. And then two, it was just a natural progression, because once they have the data, Lean on Laurel was able to provide, well, cool, can you help me with my copy? Can you help me with this? And can you help me with that? But then it created it created another great problem that you and I were able to solve whenever I visited in March, I think it was. It was January. I spent a couple of days with you in Phoenix. And so if we look at the blitz, that was me being able to add, immediately $10,000 to my, like, what do you say, your bottom line or whatever, like $10,000. Can we do it over again and again and again? And because that first dibs post worked so well, I just kind of carried it over into the $7 program. And people are like, can we do it again? Which was validation that, yes, they wanted to do it again. But I started doing that first dibs list before we had even, launched the next blitz, and already had people raising their hand. And that's how we continuously get people, onto the wait list for the blitz. Is we only have 100 people. Let's talk about, like, the significance behind, like, only doing it for a certain amount of people, because I think people look at what I do and they're like, Laurel is capping so much of her stuff out when she could be making more right now. kind of
Hmm.
like talk people through how you talk me through those, like, where people are telling me I'm crazy and you're like, restraint. Let's do it this way instead.
Yeah, so a wait list is a funny thing, and there's a few principles there's a few things it accomplishes. The first is we'll start with system reliability. System reliability is really important. And if you've ever had, you know, one week you get 10 clients and you acquire them for $4 a client, the next week you get four clients and they cost you $63 to acquire. And so that is a lack of reliability. It is a high grade anxiety all the time, not having any idea if you're going to make money or lose money tomorrow, not having any idea if it'll convert tomorrow because it converted yesterday, but not the day before that. Not having any idea if, system wide, if people are getting the experience that you want them to get and all that stuff that gets really difficult with scale. A waitlist does a few things in terms of system reliability. First, it helps manage expectations. All right. So you say, cool, you want this thing, get on a list. And you've done a few things. You've told them that there's high demand. You've told them. So if you imagine a bar, and you're a little drunk and you walk in and you kind of act like an idiot because that's just what you do at 2 a.m. when you're drunk. Uh, uh, and so that the bartender and bouncers and the people there may have to suffer fools quite often. Um, However, if you go to a bar and there's a line out the door and you have to stand in that line, and while you're in that line, you're being told like, hey, look, you can move to the front. Uh, if you are respectful and yada yada, and so you're already managing expectations where the friction, it was such a pain in the ass to get in this bar, and there's a line out the door, so I don't want to get kicked out because I can't just come back in. I'm more likely to behave less like an asshole. uh, and that's true for buyers of products as well. When you sit on a list, when you wait in a line, uh, it's a moment to sober up, so to speak, and figure out, okay, I'm going to get an opportunity to get in that bar or that club. Uh, and just by standing here and seeing the demand and hearing people talk and getting educated, I'm less likely to be a dingleberry when I go in. And so the wait list does that too. It's implied that there's high demand, and if I act out, I'll get kicked out, and if I get kicked out, then it's really hard to get back in. I got to go all the way back to the end of the line. So you tend to get better behavior, but more importantly, uh, if you are the owner of that bar or that club, and you know, okay, they have this base knowledge, they know what to expect, and we're going to let one in every 20 minutes, right? Then you can have your whole team, your whole system, everything provide a consistent, reliable, awesome first experience. Whereas if people are just walking in willy nilly wherever you want, you don't have as much control. And in a virtual environment, I think that's really important, like the onboarding and all that stuff. And so what happens instead of when you're selling your $7 program, which is awesome. Everybody's got to sell enough of something to make enough to sustain themselves. So, um, but then at that point, when you're selling your $7 program and people are buying it at, you know, 1 in the morning your time, they're going to have a slightly different experience than if they buy it while you're sitting here and you see them come in. And there's a low grade anxiety, especially the higher the ticket, but even with your stuff, where people are rolling in and every now and then somebody comes out of nowhere and says, I'm confused. I didn't get my email. I didn't get my onboarding. I lost my, and it's happening at all random times of the day, all throughout the month. And it's just a low grade anxiety for everyone. Whereas if you can get to a point where you can open and close enrollment, hey, you could open cart, you could open enrollment and just say, I'm going to enroll people for 24 hours or until the 50 spots are full. And you can have a dedicated time where you, Christina, a team, whatever, is sitting here just for a day, onboarding everyone. So if you onboard 30 people in one day and you know that's happening and you prepare for it, those 30 people will have a better experience than if you enroll one a day for 30 days at random ass times. So it just comes from reliability, experience, and then, of course, some number of people quit with the intent of coming back. Uh, I know people that have had their Seahawks season tickets for like 10 years and they don't even go to games, but they don't want to go to the bottom of the wait list. So what happens is when people, instead of quitting with the intent of coming back, which they never do because they forget, they stay. And when people do have an opportunity to buy, they generally take it because they've experienced that they can't buy it whenever they want. And so you have generally better retention, generally a little bit easier to make sales, definitely can control the onboarding experience, and you probably get better clients. Uh, and that compounds, and you can also utilize the wait list. So people that are on your wait list now are going to see this. Um, there are always ways to help people move up the wait list based on demonstrating that they're paying attention, they're competent, et cetera, et cetera. And there's always ways to build in backdoors for people that demonstrate a certain level of something. So I'm a big fan of wait lists. We do open enrollment sometimes. Uh, I think you get a better product if you have a wait list for all the reasons I just mentioned.
And just to tack onto that, like as we were building, the stuff for my $7 program with the blitz in mind, right? So we sold out the first blitz. If we go into the Facebook group, right? And let's see if I go through my media, I'll pull up one of the posts that I do that actually keeps the blitz like pretty much full all the time. And it is let's see. So if we look at these blitz posts that I do now, this is the one that was from May. To Nick's point, publicly, and I think this is what's really super important. Like if you look at the post that I did for the first dibs, there was over 500 comments. Here, who's ready for another 3-day blitz? There's 117 comments, and if we keep going through like some of these blitz posts here, every time I do one of these posts, I'm doing it strategically because people are asking like to be on the wait list for the next. And so that's one of the things that you're going to see me do is every time I do one of these blitzes, I'm always making a list of people who already have their hands up. I know there's a lot of blitz posts in here. So check out, there are a few seats left for the March Blitz. I'm consistently saying who wants in on the next Blitz. And so publicly, people are actually seeing, hey, Laurel's doing another Blitz, and there are already people, because people can see that I'm not bullshitting them, that people are like, have their hands up, like, hey, I want to be on the next Blitz. And so if they look at the series of posts, they'll know that there are really only 100 seats left, and 200 people have raised their hand to be in it. And I think something, it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to be in this, right? So now we have a proven concept that the Blitz is a thing, right? Every single month I'm selling them out. 100 people always buy. So that's $10,000 a month in added revenue with me only spending, I want to say it's an hour and a half a day. So it's like 4.5 hours of my time to make $10,000. I don't think that there would have been a better way for me to actually add $10,000 a month in revenue than doing something like the Blitz. Now, because Nick was just talking about the waitlist thing, the second change that we made that was an amazing idea is putting the $7 program on a waitlist. And so as you can see, yesterday, which as we're recording this video, I made the last plug like, hey, and I had been doing a series of these posts over the last 2 months that I was going to cap my $7 program out at 4,000. Again, a lot of people told me I'm crazy, but because of all of the things that I learned from being in Nick's ecosystem, is that if the demand is there, there's going to be less churn. There's going to be always people who want to get in. And to Nick's point, people are going to be less assholes, because there are people who come into the $7 program like a revolving door. And I wanted to solve that problem. I wanted people to stay. I wanted people to actually consume the content. And so the next thing that we decided to do, which by the way, which I know is totally towards our record month, was getting people to buy the yearly of the $7 program. Because what, to Nick's point, by telling people in the $7 program and to my public, hey, there's going to be a wait list, I had a flood of people saying, you know what, because I told them if their card gets declined or if anything happens, they would have to go to the bottom of the wait list. And so people were like, send me the yearly. I'm going to buy the yearly. And so people are no longer buying the monthly, they're actually buying the yearly. And so that was an added bump in cash flow. And again, publicly, they know that I'm not bullshit. They see the amount of people who are commenting on my post wanting to get in before I close the door. So that was a huge bump to the income. So first we have the blitz, right? But one of the things that I want you guys to understand is this is not something that just we flipped a switch on all of this stuff and it just magically happened. You can see we literally micro stepped, which is one of the best things that I've learned from you, Nick, is micro stepping, testing things to work before, right? Because I could have made one post, and if no one would have responded that I'm putting my $7 program on a waiting list, I might have started to rethink the way that I was going to do it. But because I got an automatic feedback loop of people being like, okay, send me the year, I don't want to miss out. And people being like, send me the link, I need to join. I've been joining, back and forth for years. I'm good to stay in this time. We validated that, okay, this whole waitlist thing is a great idea. And so we validated that. So that added a bump of income because we know that more people are going to buy the yearly. If we look in, okay, we announced it. Now more people are buying the yearly. That's working. So how do we actually now, because of the wait list for the $7 program, because of the successful way that we've done the blitz, it created another problem that so many people would love to have. The third bump in income was actually from the changes that Nic and I, and with the help of Julie Chanel, to my Lean on Laurel program, because the wait list was starting to get way too long for my Lean on Laurel program because of the blitz. And so you guys see how I'm making decisions based on the way that my audience is responding to things. Because of my $7 program, because of the blitz, more people are getting pulled into my Lean on Laurel program, and the wait list was getting extra long. And so what do you do whenever the wait list gets too long, Nick? We raise the price. And so that was something that I was able to do in order to boost some of that income. And then I wanted to reward people who were willing to make a commitment, because it's 90 days to data. That's something that I, repeat to people over and over again. And so we decided to shift LOL into a $1,500 a month program, and then actually reward people who made a 3-month commitment. So it's $3K for $3K, getting $3,000 up front while increasing the amount of people who weren't ready to make the commitment. Those are two things that really were able to, to bump up my income without changing anything that I was doing.
Yeah, and I think there's a point there where you just said, when the wait list gets too long, what do we do? And then there's a pause. And what most people will do is try to increase capacity. And that's okay, especially if you have a consumable like a product. But on a service or a coaching program, you kind of turn into a ticking time bomb, because the product quality, it becomes really hard to maintain if you keep increasing the capacity. You could serve 10 people better than you could serve 100, and you can serve 100 people better than you could serve 50,000. And so what people miss is that if you have a wait list, there are a few ways to handle it. One is you stay on the wait list, and that'll work just fine. Two is you try to increase the capacity. If you try to increase the capacity to make more money, you run the risk of, one, the wait list getting smaller, which means the reliability in the future has gone down. And so I like to have a big wait list. And two, it gets harder to deliver a great product. So if you think boutique, And you understand that the wait list gives you another lever to pull, which is the price elasticity. The longer the line outside the building, the more people will pay to get in the building. And so instead of enrolling twice as many people, you can double the cost. And what that does is it allows you to deliver a better product, which creates more demand. And you kind of flywheel it that way. So, one, I applaud you for recognizing that, because most people feel that pressure and they start trying to find ways to get more people into the program. And that works until it stops working. And then once it stops working, meaning you found ways to get everybody in your program, the demand is no longer higher than your capacity, which makes it really hard to sell when you got uh, a program that doesn't have the supply demand curve working in its favor, or product or anything like that. So, just to highlight that, a lot of people, when you pause, say, look, what do you do when the wait list is too big? Say, start a group coaching program. You know, like, no. I mean, you could do that. That is an option. But generally speaking, I would test the limits of how elastic is the price. Because if somebody's paying $297 for Lean on Laurel, which it was at some point in time.
Yeah, it was 197, and then that was whenever I first started working with you. It was 197 a month. Then we had 100 people in there, and a wait list started, and he was like, nope, you got to bump up the price. 297, same thing, 100 members at 297. And I remember you saying, nope, you got to skip the 497 and go straight to 1,000, which was hard for me at the time to even fathom that people would pay that. And they did. And, I was able to cut the amount of people. We went from 100 people to actually 50 to make more money by raising the price. And now whenever I raised the price back in January for Lean on Laurel, we switched it from a group program to a one-on-one with Flex Voxer. I was able to actually, without really changing much of anything, I was able to, instead of having 50 people in, go down to 30 and actually serve those people at a higher level, and get better results at the higher price. And but those three changes, and I want you guys to like kind of understand like what we did here, because we kind of started off the conversation, how do you build $1 million a year business? And total transparency, it's me and Christina running pretty much the whole show. We haven't had to add employees and all of these stuff. I mean, we have one assistant that works with us part-time, but like other than that, like this is literally how I built my entire business with Nic's help. And you always tell people Nic's like my secret weapon, and I'm so happy that he's allowed me to share share him with all of you guys, because I know that there's so many people that are pulling you guys in different directions. But I wanted to we wanted to do this over the shoulder video to show you guys what's possible, right? I put a cap on everything. I lowered the cap on my Lean on Laurel program. I went from 100 to 50 to now 30. And then my $7 program, I'm cutting it off at 4,000 when everyone's telling me to scale. And look how I've like actually grown my revenue. I've grown my business with having less people. I think, Nic, people think that, oh, in order to grow your business, you have to have all of these followers, all of this stuff. But, just because of your amazing, mentoring and a lot of your principles, I've been able to grow a very successful lifestyle business for myself.
So back to lifestyle. I just think it's important that you recognize, and we've had this talk where, you might say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and say, well, do you still want time to go to the beach? Like, yes. Well, then don't do that. And there's people like me who I like to have a bunch of free time in my calendar. Which, people always talk about I screenshot my calendar in my book, and my calendar is wide open, but I'm always here. It's just my personality. Like, I'm always at the office. I like to read and write. And so I build things a little bit different. So I think it's a really important component, but regardless, the blitz, I think everybody can model in some way, where you say, here's what you paid for. Now, here is something on top of that to help you implement, if you want implementers. If you want readers, you might say, here is something that you can buy that I will ship to you and you can read. So there's always like, here's what you paid for, and then here's additional support. And that's the equivalent of the blitz. Maybe you publish a book and, once a month you send it out. Obviously the blitz has live components that make it really compelling for people to want to be there. Uh, the wait list and the shift to lean on Laurel, uh, the concept of the wait list is just building a demand and reliability. And it's really important that you don't have a fake wait list. It's like a fake countdown timer.
That's why I
Uh,
like doing all of my posts, like whenever I'm building up these wait lists public on social media. Like you
mhm.
can't refute it. Like Laurel's not BSing you. You could actually see it on my social media. And so anytime I'm announcing that there's an open slot for Lean on Laurel, I'm always posting it so that people could actually see that people are saying, I want that, I want that, I want that. And it's there's no fake, like, so people can't disprove that there's really a waiting list for everything. And I think there's some value in that too.
There is because, and it's brilliant because if I have a brick and mortar, if I have an ice cream shop or a donut shop, and there's a line out the door, I don't have to convince anybody of anything. You can see the line out the door, but with a virtual program or remote program, you have to kind of build in some mechanisms just so people can see and that there's a line out the door and that it's real. And I think you've done a great job of doing that with the way that you use social media. And then so that's the wait list, and that's the trick is have a real wait list for a real reason, and then find ways to make sure people can see that's a very real line. And then lean on Laurel. So if somebody's paying you 197 a month versus somebody that's paying you 1,500 a month, for everybody listening, uh, you don't take the difference. So from 200 to 1,500, you don't take the $1,300 and shove it straight in your pocket and yeah. Uh, what happens is when they charge you 1,500, you could take 1,000 of that. And I'm not saying Laurel does this or that you should do this, but you could take 1,000 of it and put it right back into the client, and you'd still be making more, but their experience would be exponentially better. And so for those of you that have price aversion to like, oh, I can't charge more, um, charging more allows you could charge $500 more, put all of that 500 back into the experience, and they will get significantly more than $500 additional value from the experience if you're thoughtful about it. So um, the increasing price creates bigger wait lists, more goodwill, more demand if you take some of that additional margin and you put it back into making the product better. So I think raising the price is really important when appropriate, for those reasons, not because charge what you're worth or not so you can make more money. Uh, but if you want to deliver a great product, it there's a cost to it. But you can take if you give me $100 to spend on you. So you say, hey, here's $100 to spend on Laurel, and I'm really thoughtful about it. I can send you or have you come out to the office and do something that is worth to you exponentially more than $100.
Mm.
Right. And
That's
that's
actually a
kind of
good that's actually a good point because like one of the things that I had to actually remove, and you and I talked about this, and speaking of adding value at the 197 a month, the 297 a month, even at the $1,000 a month, there was no one-on-one element. It was all group. And so what I was able to do is I used to charge, $1,000 for a power hour with me. I canceled that and reallocated it to the Lean on Laurel program so that I could spend one-on-one time with my clients. And so it was kind of doing what you were saying there, where I was reallocating my time. And so instead of spending it with people who are just one-off calls, I was able to actually put it into my Lean on Laurel program to increase the value without going from my own personal time to the thing. And I think that's super important, for people to understand is like, it's not about like, there are ways that you can increase value without putting in more time. You just have to know where to find that time and reallocate it.
Yeah, in upfront time. So there are ways to increase value that live outside of, honestly, if I said, hey, look, you can pay $30 and come to this thing, or you buy this thing that's laying around, course. And if you implement the course, then I will put you to the top of the wait list for my $7 program. Or I will give you a backdoor to enroll in the $7 program because you completed the course, which proves you're an implementer. What that does is that makes that $30 course that is valuable in and of itself. It makes it exponentially more valuable to the people that care about getting to the top of the list. Now, we didn't add any extra work outside of, we just kind of changed the frame a little bit. We used all the stuff that's already existing and reframed it in a way to add more value to the right people. So now this $30 course is totally worth it in and of itself, but it also represents getting to the top of the wait list, which to a handful of people, that's shit. They'd pay a lot more than $30 for that. And so you could start just thinking about how to utilize some of the stuff. But if you are hell bent on scaling an open enrollment, you won't have the assets laying around to kind of engineer a narrative that adds value to the right people, because you'll be so busy just trying to roll people into a program and then fixing all the holes when capacity is too great, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, because I think people's their first reaction is, "Oh, I got to go hire people to help fulfill in this thing." I see that so many times. Like a lot of my students, I'm like, "Why the hell did you go hire someone? Now we've got a whole other mountain
Mm-hmm.
of stuff to conquer."
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm willing to bet for most people, and I have a bunch of data on this, where you might have three salespeople and they're crushing it, and whatever. And then they're not crushing it, then they're crushing it, then they're not crushing it, and then they're blaming the ads, and then it's a full time job having employees. Um, but I'll give you an example. There's a scenario where a very well known brand, very well known higher ticket brand, has three salespeople, and they enrolled five people in a month, which is pretty low for having three salespeople.
Yeah.
Um, which is the way it goes sometimes. And I am certain, given the brand equity, that had all month long, they just put everybody on a wait list. And at the end of the month, opened cart, enrolled people, and closed cart, they would have gotten more than five. And they wouldn't have needed three salespeople to do it. And so that's kind of the whole, I get it. I understand why one salesperson means this much money. So two must mean twice as much, and three must mean three times. And it never works out that way. But once you lose control, it is very, very hard to get back. Whereas if you're telling me, 60 applications came in, you closed five of them with three salespeople, I'm going to get rid of the salespeople, because you can actually build a system that will close more than five of those people. You don't need people yet. Uh, so I think people are quick to hire, but everything we just talked about, from the blitz, which you need to what? Make a post and fire up a Zoom and show up. The wait list and the changes to the Lead on Laurel program, boom, record month, no extra moving parts, no new people, no new complexities. That puts you in a better position to have another record month.
Yeah. And what's really cool is all of those changes, like if you just look at them on the spreadsheet from that very first change with the blitz, we were able to push over $20,000 in additional income every single month by just making those changes over the last several months. And so this all started in November and we're sitting at May. So for those of you guys who think, oh, it was an overnight thing, no, we started making these changes in November. By January, our new floor for our business was $20,000 more than it was last year. Automatically, our floor raised, and that's something that Nick's taught me, a lot, is try to raise the floor instead of the ceiling. And so that's why I still get excited when I do record months, but I'm more excited about the raising the floor. I mean, because just making that, those couple of changes raise the floor by 20 grand. And that's a lot if you look at it for my income for the next year. So, Nick, any closing words for everyone?
I mean, you covered a lot. I think it's helpful for people if you're watching to get your hands on any over the shoulder stuff that I do, that Laurel does, or that anybody does. It's not as polished, it's not as concise because the world we live in is doesn't actually work that way. Uh, but I would go back through this. I would watch this again, and I would start taking notes because the micro stepping, right, that Laurel referred to, it's part of the game, which means you don't have to understand everything. You got to pull something out that you can test in a very small way, that you can micro step, like make a Facebook post like Laurel did, and start testing stuff and then engage the field. If you're in Laurel's $7 program, uh utilize the Ask Laurel threads, like engage, get the data, and do stuff. If you are in Man Bites Dog or the arena or whatever, then you already know the structure. It's built on engaging the field. And so I encourage you to try to extract something that you can try before asking for help. Just pull something out, take the tiniest step that you can, and you'll start to find answers on your own. Uh, for those that are in a position closer to where Laurel has been in the last couple of years, obviously we have a whole curriculum, whole thing, and the curriculum is unique because we don't live in a classroom. So I have a whole curriculum laid out, and in the success circle, which is Laurel and I put that together for really so we could have a group that we like to hang out with, but so we can have more Laurels and more, more people in our ecosystem that we collaborate with and do cool stuff with. But the curriculum's not taught step by step. It's more like, okay, cool. So you're in the middle of it. What are you in the middle of? And it's like we'll teach that part of the curriculum in real time and then kind of backfill all the concepts and principles. And so um, somewhere there'll be a link to the success circle. It has a wait list. You know how we feel about wait lists. So if you want to get on the wait list, what we try to do is somebody gets on the wait list, we try to give them valuable stuff so that them waiting for us to open the enrollment's not the limit that they're facing. Uh, that is tscircle.com. And you read all about it and get on the wait list if you want. Um, and we'll open enrollment when we open enrollment. But that's kind of the whole thing is everything Laurel talked about and everything she's done. Most of the things she's done over the last 3, 4, 5 years have been counterintuitive. And sometimes when you share them, they're obvious in hindsight. But we want to help as many people see these things before they go down too many of the wrong rabbit holes, because it's very, very expensive to hire some of these, $40,000, $50,000 programs, and they're just shoving you in some cookie cutter model that doesn't really work for anyone. So be cognizant of that. And if you want to get on the wait list, it's TS, then the success, tscircle.com. Get on the wait list. You'll keep your spot on the wait list until your request to be removed. So we're not going to do any like act now or lose your spot. You won't. You'll just stay on the wait list until you request us to remove you. And when a